This will shock you. A 19-year-old Florida student is accused of murdering a newborn baby born in a dorm bathroom. The details of this tragedy are chilling in their cold-bloodedness. Audio recordings of confessions, blood, a trash can, and a baby's body. Shocking details have been revealed, suggesting that it may have been a premeditated murder. On a quiet college campus in Lakeland, Florida, tragedy struck in one of the most unexpected places, the communal bathroom of a women's dormitory. It was in this setting that 19-year-old student Caitlin Yazviak gave birth alone, in secret, and allegedly committed a horrifying act that would later shake not only her university community, but also draw national media attention. The story is not only tragic in its outcome, but disturbing in the events that led to the death of a newborn just minutes after entering the world. Caitlin was known to her peers as a shy and academically focused young woman. A freshman at Florida Southern College, she had grown up in a conservative household and maintained a quiet, reserved demeanor. According to classmates, she rarely partied, kept to herself.
We have not had the occasion to prosecute a case like this in a while, but when the opportunity came for us to investigate this case, we followed the law.
And often seemed stressed, though no one suspected she was hiding a pregnancy. In retrospect, some fellow students recalled that she had been wearing increasingly loose clothing and avoided social events in the final weeks of the semester. On the evening of the incident, campus security received a 911 call reporting a potential medical emergency in one of the residence hall bathrooms. When emergency responders arrived, they found a gruesome scene: blood on the floors, towels stuffed into trash cans, and a newborn's lifeless body.
It's absolutely heartbreaking, and she made a choice, and so she's going to have to face consequences for making the choice that she did.
Partially concealed in a trash bag. Yazviak, pale and weak, was transported to the hospital, where she eventually admitted to giving birth in the stall. The initial reports were shocking. According to statements from paramedics and police officers,
we, of course, in making our filing decision, did our due diligence. We wanted to make sure that we chose the right charge, and we did. We've not had anything like this in quite a long time.
Yazviak told them that she had panicked after the baby was born and that she didn't know what to do. She claimed she thought the baby was not breathing and, in her words, wrapped it in a towel and put it in the trash. However, investigators would soon question whether the baby had in fact been born alive and whether the death was truly accidental. An autopsy performed on the infant revealed evidence of live birth. The lungs showed signs of respiration, meaning the baby had taken at least several breaths. Additionally, there were no congenital abnormalities or birth trauma severe enough to cause death on their own. The cause of death was determined to be a combination of neglect, exposure, and possible suffocation. These findings shifted the tone of the investigation from a medical emergency to a potential homicide. Police obtained surveillance footage from the dorm, showing Yazviak entering the bathroom alone, carrying a towel and a small bag. She remained inside for nearly 45 minutes. No other students were seen entering during that time. When she exited, she appeared pale and shaky, holding only her phone. The bag she had entered with was no longer visible. During subsequent questioning, Yazviak maintained that she had not known she was pregnant until going into labor. She claimed she believed the cramps she was experiencing were from her period. However, detectives found evidence that contradicted her version. Search histories on her laptop and phone included terms like, "Can you give..."
It absolutely breaks my heart to know that this baby girl could still be alive today if this woman had alerted authorities that she needed help. For crying out loud, there's a fire station across the street from the University of Tampa. Tampa General Hospital is a mere 2 to 3 minutes away by car. This baby girl's death was completely avoidable.
Birth without knowing, and how to hide a pregnancy. One entry, dated 2 weeks prior to the birth, simply read, "I think I'm pregnant." Detectives also spoke with Yazviak's roommate, who reported hearing weird sounds and crying from the bathroom that night but did not intervene, assuming someone was sick. Another student said Yazviak had once asked where the building's security cameras were located. That conversation at the time had seemed innocent, even paranoid, but took on new significance after the fact. As details emerged, the case gained traction in the media, with headlines referring to it as the dorm room infant death. Public opinion quickly polarized. Some expressed sympathy, suggesting that Yazviak was overwhelmed, scared, and mentally unprepared. Others pointed to what they saw as deliberate concealment, arguing that any mother who hides a pregnancy and discards a baby cannot claim ignorance. Mental health experts consulted by investigators noted that Yazviak may have experienced a psychological condition known as pregnancy denial, a phenomenon in which women subconsciously suppress or ignore the reality of pregnancy. However, the prosecution would later argue that, even if she was in denial, the sequence of actions after the birth pointed toward intent and awareness. At the hospital, while under observation, Yazviak made several statements that were later entered into evidence. She reportedly said, "I didn't want anyone to know," and "I knew I would get in trouble." These remarks, according to the prosecution, suggested a level of consciousness and guilt inconsistent with a complete psychological break. In the days following the incident, the college community held vigils and counseling sessions. Many students were stunned, unable to reconcile the quiet girl from their classes with the horrific events described in police reports. A memorial for the unnamed infant was created near the campus chapel, adorned with white flowers and handwritten notes that read, "You mattered, and rest in peace, little one." Meanwhile, law enforcement officials prepared to file formal charges against Yazviak. The evidence was mounting, from forensic pathology and digital traces to witness accounts and her own statements. The question that remained was whether this was a young woman's tragic mistake or a cold, calculated decision to eliminate a problem. The legal proceedings against 19-year-old Caitlin Yazviak began swiftly after the initial autopsy report confirmed the newborn was delivered alive and likely died as a result of neglect or suffocation. The Lakeland Police Department, in collaboration with the Polk County District Attorney's Office, initiated a full-scale criminal investigation. The case, already garnering national attention, now moved from speculation to structured legal action centered on determining intent, accountability, and mental state. Within a week of the incident, Yazviak was formally charged with second-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. Prosecutors announced that they would not pursue the death penalty due to her age and lack of prior criminal record, but emphasized that the charges carried severe penalties, including the possibility of life imprisonment. The arrest affidavit cited evidence of deliberate concealment of pregnancy, failure to seek medical attention during labor, and intentional abandonment of a living child. Investigators continued to compile an extensive body of evidence. Forensic analysis of the bathroom revealed multiple blood samples, later confirmed through DNA testing to belong to both Yazviak and the infant. Swabs taken from a towel and trash bag confirmed the presence of amniotic fluid and fetal tissue, further solidifying the timeline of events. The baby, a full-term male, was determined to be otherwise healthy and viable at the time of birth. Perhaps most damning were the digital records retrieved from Yazviak's phone and laptop. Prosecutors presented a timeline constructed from her search history, text messages, and app usage. Roughly 6 weeks prior to the incident, she had searched "How to tell if you're pregnant without a test" and "How long can you hide a pregnancy?" More recently, she had searched "What happens if a baby dies after birth?" and "Can police find out if you give birth alone?" These searches, according to the prosecution, indicated awareness and premeditation. In court documents, they argued that she understood the nature of her condition, feared social and familial consequences, and made a series of calculated decisions that ultimately resulted in the death of her child. A significant point of contention emerged regarding her mental state. Jozwiak's defense team, led by public defender Carla Hammond, argued that the young woman suffered from acute psychological trauma and possible postpartum psychosis. They introduced expert testimony from a clinical psychologist who had evaluated Jozwiak during her post-arrest detainment. The psychologist reported signs of dissociation, anxiety, and depressive episodes, asserting that Caitlin had been in a state of denial about the pregnancy and had not acted with clear intention. The defense also emphasized Caitlin's background, an honors student with no criminal history, raised in a strict household with minimal open discussion about sex or reproductive health. Her parents, though not present at every court appearance, submitted written statements expressing shock and devastation, insisting they had no knowledge of the pregnancy and would have intervened had they known. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Jordan Marks, pushed back aggressively. Marks argued that Jozwiak had ample opportunity to seek help, confide in anyone, or call emergency services. Instead, she brought a towel and trash bag into the bathroom, gave birth alone, and discarded a breathing infant into a receptacle. "This was not panic," he stated during pretrial hearings. "This was preparation." Witness testimony added further layers to the case. Jozwiak's roommate testified that she had noticed Caitlin behaving strangely in the days leading up to the birth, staying up all night and skipping meals. Another friend recounted a conversation in which Jozwiak allegedly said, "I'm just really scared something's going to happen," though she did not elaborate. These statements, while not directly incriminating, were used by both sides to build contrasting narratives. The defense saw them as evidence of a girl in crisis, while the prosecution saw signs of calculated fear. When the trial began, it was met with a media circus. News trucks parked outside the courthouse, and social media buzzed with commentary, often split between sympathy and condemnation. Some saw Jozwiak as a tragic figure failed by society's silence around reproductive education. Others viewed her as cold, calculating, and remorseless. Opening statements reflected this divide. The prosecution described the death as entirely preventable, entirely deliberate, while the defense portrayed it as a product of mental breakdown, ignorance, and fear. The infant, referred to in court as baby doe, became a symbol of innocence lost. Prosecutors intentionally used emotional language, reminding the jury that the child had no name, no chance, no voice, only a few breaths. Throughout the trial, Jozwiak sat silently, occasionally wiping away tears, but largely impassive. Her demeanor was closely watched by the jury and the media alike. The defense warned against interpreting her silence as guilt, citing the emotional trauma she had endured and her prescribed antidepressants during custody. One of the key moments in the trial came when the 911 recording was played in court. The neighbor who found Jozwiak had made the call, her voice trembling as she described a girl bleeding badly and something in the trash. The call served to reinforce the horror of the scene and the urgency of what unfolded. The trial lasted just over 2 weeks. In closing arguments, both sides returned to the central question: was this a deliberate killing or a tragedy born of ignorance and fear? The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder and aggravated manslaughter of a child. Sentencing was scheduled for a later date, with the judge citing the need for a full psychiatric review. However, legal analysts predicted a lengthy prison term, likely spanning decades. The verdict brought a mix of relief and sorrow, a sense of justice served, but a life forever lost. Following the conclusion of Caitlin Jozwiak's trial and her conviction on charges of second-degree murder and aggravated manslaughter, the case continued to resonate deeply within legal, academic, and social spheres. It was no longer just a courtroom drama. It had become a focal point for discussions about youth mental health, reproductive education, legal reform, and society's failure to recognize signs of crisis in vulnerable individuals. The story of a newborn's death in a college dormitory bathroom challenged public assumptions about who commits crimes, why they do it, and what role systems of support, or lack thereof, play in shaping outcomes. In the immediate aftermath of the trial, Florida Southern College held multiple closed-door meetings and forums to address student concerns. The administration faced harsh criticism for allegedly failing to notice or act on visible signs that Józwiak was in distress or concealing a pregnancy. Despite statements from university officials expressing sympathy and offering mental health support services, some faculty members and students argued that deeper systemic changes were needed. One professor described the event as a wake-up call for institutions that pride themselves on academic excellence, but often overlook emotional well-being. Several student-led petitions circulated, calling for the college to implement mandatory mental health screenings, improved access to reproductive education, and better dormitory oversight. Though the college declined to comment on specific policy changes, internal documents later revealed a renewed focus on training residential assistants to recognize mental health red flags and establishing anonymous reporting channels for students concerned about peers. On a broader level, the Józwiak case reignited national debates about the safe haven laws, statutes that allow parents to safely surrender newborns at designated locations without legal consequence. In Florida, the law permits surrender within 7 days of birth, yet critics argue that awareness of these laws remains dangerously low, particularly among young or first-time mothers. Advocacy groups seized on the case to launch informational campaigns, posting signage in dormitories, bathrooms, and community centers with hotline numbers and surrender site details. Legal analysts also weighed in on the implications of the verdict. Some noted that while the jury's decision seemed just based on the evidence, it raised uncomfortable questions about how the justice system treats young women in crisis. Was Caitlin a murderer, or was she a symbol of deeper social neglect? Could a more robust support system, medical, educational, or familial, have prevented the tragedy entirely? Prominent legal expert and former prosecutor Lisa Frey stated during a CNN panel, "This wasn't just about what happened in that bathroom. It was about what failed long before Caitlin ever walked in." She went on to cite lack of access to reproductive care, stigmatization of unplanned pregnancies, and mental health taboos as contributing factors. Her remarks sparked widespread discourse across media outlets and online platforms. On social media, the case generated polarized reactions. Hashtags such as #Justice for Baby Do and #Support Caitlin trended simultaneously, reflecting the nation's divided sentiment. One camp viewed Józwiak as a heartless perpetrator, the other as a frightened teenager driven to desperation by silence and shame. Documentaries and podcasts began exploring the case from multiple angles, including one popular series titled Behind the Bathroom Door, which featured interviews with students, faculty, psychologists, and legal experts. Józwiak's sentencing hearing, held 2 months after the verdict, was one of the most emotionally charged moments of the entire legal process. Victim impact statements were read, not by the infant's relatives, as he had none, but by members of the community. A local reverend who had led a memorial vigil spoke of the sanctity of life and the importance of compassion. A counselor from the college urged the court to consider Józwiak's mental state and expressed sorrow that no one had reached her in time. The judge, visibly moved, delivered a sentence of 38 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During her brief statement before sentencing, Józwiak apologized through tears, saying, There are no words to bring him back. I was scared and ashamed. I will regret that moment for the rest of my life. Her defense attorney later confirmed that she would not appeal the verdict, stating that Caitlin had accepted the consequences and wished to begin the long process of healing, whatever that may look like. In the months that followed, numerous state legislators proposed bills aimed at enhancing reproductive health education in schools and colleges. One such bill, dubbed Baby Doe's Law, called for mandatory on-campus signage about safe haven options and required colleges to distribute informational pamphlets to all first-year students. Though the bill faced political hurdles, it was widely supported by mental health organizations and child welfare advocates. Meanwhile, researchers in the field of psychology began analyzing the case as part of broader studies into postpartum trauma, youth mental health, and pregnancy concealment. Academic papers explored how cultural taboos, shame, and fear can intersect with underdeveloped emotional coping mechanisms in young adults. Many concluded that the Yazviak case was emblematic of a hidden crisis affecting thousands of women each year, many of whom never make the headlines. As time passed, the media gradually shifted attention to other stories, but for those directly involved, the shadow of the tragedy remained. Students who had lived in the dormitory often spoke of never seeing that bathroom the same way again. The baby, buried in a small cemetery under the name Unknown Angel, became a symbol of innocence and, paradoxically, of how both silence and stigma can kill. To this day, the case of Caitlin Yazviak continues to be discussed in law schools, counseling courses, and advocacy circles. Whether seen as a cautionary tale, a legal milestone, or a societal failure, it remains a chilling reminder that behind every statistic lies a story, and behind every tragedy, a chain of moments where something might have changed the ending.